All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's live and in-person debate between Dr. Dino and Jackson Roe on the topic of evolution. We can consider this a Valentine's Day debate. And so, what a treat we have, Kent and Jackson. Format wise, for the audience, we are going to be having a format very similar to our previous in person debate from last month between Kent and Grayson. Kent and Jackson are going to be discussing the topic of evolution, and I will be saving your questions. So please, if you have a question on the topic of creation versus evolution, tag me either at Donny or at Standing for Truth. And when Kent and Jackson are bored of talking to each other, we'll engage some audience questions. So with that, Kent, my brother, we're going to hand it over to you for some words of introduction. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. It's good to be with you. And it's good to be with Jackson right here beside me. Came down for a couple of days, going to help us out around Dinosaur Adventureland. I wish all the evolutionists would just come see what we're doing. We're not dangerous. We're not a cult. It's without apology, we believe the Bible is true and evolution is stupid. But hey, we can tolerate it. You can take the tour. We feed them, and housing, not too bad, is it?
No, I like it.
Yeah,
very nice.
And the food and plenty to do around here. Never quits around here. Anyway, we're glad you came, Jackson. So what I wanted to find out, I state my position clearly every time. Mm-hmm. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. God made everything in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. Dinosaurs always lived with man. They're part of the normal creation. People have killed most of them, which is why many are extinct. That's why there's many legends of people killing dragons. They did not live millions of years ago. The earth is not billions of years old. I state that clearly. I think nobody questions that. So where do you stand and why? What's your position?
My position is the earth is old, but I kind of divorced that from is there a God or not. I think the earth can be old or young, and there can still be a God either way.
True.
That's basically what I'm arguing here tonight. I'm not trying to argue there's no God. Okay. I'm just going to be talking about the fossil record and the apparent order as I've seen it. Mm-hmm. I've looked for a lot of fossils and done a lot of research into it, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about tonight.
Okay, now today you took the tour with me. You survived the real tour.
Yeah.
You recommend people take the real tour?
Yes, they should take it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and you stopped, excuse me, where we drilled our well a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. They drilled down 300 feet and hit a layer of real tiny seashells. And you found some?
Yeah, they're right here.
Wow.
Some right here. Yeah.
How many did you find?
A bunch of them. These aren't all of them, but
okay.
Yeah, there are several in there.
And so 300 feet down in our gravel pit, then had to go down 365 to hit good water. And so we have another well on the property now. So you found these fossils. Mm-hmm. And how would you explain how they got 300 feet down below the ground level?
Well, I was looking on the geologic map of Alabama, and we're right on a border between, I think it was Miocene and Eocene. I think we're on the surface rock is Miocene, but drilling down that far, it should have hit Eocene rock, which in my opinion is about 40 million years old, 50 million years old. So these appear to be Venericardia clam fragments, and I also found something called Turritella, little snail.
Right.
And those are native to the Eocene.
Okay.
So you find that across the board when you identify something and you look where it is on a geologic map, they always line up without exception. That's always what I've found.
Well, I think we can discuss that for a minute. Put my slides up for just a minute, Joseph, would you? Here's what he's talking about. If you look on the right, the top one, the Holocene, and then the Pleistocene, and then the Pliocene, and the Miocene. And then the Eocene is down below that in orange. My position is this geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world except in the textbook. It's made up in 1830, and all these layers formed in one big flood in Noah's time. And just like we talked about today, the moon lifting the tide up and down, if it was uninterrupted, would be much higher, like a 200-foot tidal change. It's not the tide going up and down that's the problem. It's the water rushing in and out of that bump. It's the sideways movement of the water that made all those layers. Just like sideways movement in this sand art toy makes layers quickly. And so if there's any sorting to them, it's based upon who died first, maybe their habitat or body density or something like that, and not at all evolution. So you believe the fossils found in the Eocene slowly Of course, my position is there is no Eocene, okay? They slowly evolved into something else. Where's the evidence of anything today changing to be something new?
Well, to see it like in one generation or several generations is probably not going to happen. But example, I told someone else earlier today, if you look at a flip book, you look at the first picture and the last picture, they look totally different, but there's a gradient. If you flip the pages, it slowly becomes something. And sure, it doesn't happen with individuals. It happens in populations. Maybe one population will be separated from another one, and they just keep separating out, and they get more and more distant. It's kind of like a flip book, and then you look at the one up here in the imaginary chart I just drew in the air, and they look nothing alike, and they're totally different.
Well, you got the imaginary part right. So in other words, we don't actually see it happen. We would have to have more time to see it happen, which we don't have, and which we can't. So we can't see that.
Sure, we can see things like as you showed me, the many varieties of ducks coming into being,
right.
Different breeds of ducks. But to see something like a new species takes a little longer, a new genus even longer, new family way longer. So, yeah.
Well, my position is this entire classification system that Carolus Linnaeus made up, been modified 1,000 times, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. All that is man's attempt to classify things in an order he thinks they ought to go in. The animals do not care. They don't care what we call them or how we classify them. When they go to look for a mate, they know what to look for. Up on the North 40, we've got cows and sheep and donkeys all mixed together, and they know what their kind is. Now, some scientists might not know what their kind is, but they know. And so my point is, we don't ever see this happening. We have to imagine it over a longer period of time. So you understand why I keep saying, even if this is true, it's still, at this point, not science. It's a religious belief because it's not observable. By a strict definition of science, we have to see it, test it, demonstrate it. I think they always fall to the illustration of we haven't seen Pluto go around the sun. Okay, we see other planets do the same thing. I think it's logical to conclude Pluto would go around the sun if we could watch it long enough. But that's very different. That's a straw man compared to seeing a living creature produce something different than its kind. If they did produce something different, who would that one marry? And then they got to be in the same place at the same time in history. What if the female evolved 100 years before the male?
Well, let me give an example.
Okay, go ahead.
Like we see small changes happening in a short time. So I think it would stand to reason that big changes could happen over a long time. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I don't know that I would agree. I think we see farmers have been trying hard for centuries, thousands of years to get changes in, let's say, cows, okay? They want some cows to give more milk. So they select the best milk givers and they breed those for the next generation. And over time, they end up with cows giving 300 or 280 pounds a day is now the record. It's still a cow. It's still giving milk. It's not giving cottage cheese or ice cream. It's still a cow, obviously a cow. The changes that we see are all limited to the same kind. They're still a cow. So I think you guys imagine that this process, farmers have been trying to make this happen. That's been called artificial selection, where they work at it really hard. Natural selection, I think, would take much longer, but either one is just a selection process. It's not creating anything. But you guys want to give this selection process creative abilities. I say that's not science. That's all.
Well, for like new information, I think you're talking about like pesticide resistance or antibiotic resistance. They're scientific papers. I obviously don't have them on me, but that have led to resistance of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and certain organisms. And some of these are mutations like duplication mutations, copies one area of the DNA, and then that copied section has a further point mutation on it. So that's change, and it's new information by that definition.
Because it has a point mutation.
On a duplicated set, yeah.
So on a duplicated gene, there's a point mutation. Now, my point would be that's not adding information. That's selecting from information that's already existing. In the case of pesticide resistance, you got, let's say, an infestation of ants. You spray a chemical on them, and it kills 99%. The 1% that it did not kill already had something in the gene code. They were already resistant.
Mhm.
So you now have selected that small slice of the ant population to survive to make the next generation. That didn't create anything. It's not any new information, and it's still an ant. Where can we see it turning to a different? God said they would bring forth after their kind.
Mhm.
What examples do you have where that didn't happen?
Like something giving birth to something in one generation,
No, in a million
in a
generations.
million generations.
You'd have to imagine it. You can't see it.
Well, you could like sheep in a million generations. That would take quite a long time. Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Take bacteria. You get 3 a day. Okay.
sure.
3 generations a day. Have we ever seen a bacteria produce a non-bacteria? You may become resistant to some kind of, pesticide or bactericide or whatever, but it's still a bacteria.
Mhm.
Do we ever see the bacteria begin to grow legs or develop a heart or lungs or eyes or nose? I mean, the textbooks say the single-celled creature like a bacteria or protozoa or amoeba turned into everything. Those are the charts they use. They make the kids learn this stuff. I point out these family trees are pure imagination. Even if they turn out later to be true, as of today, 2024, they haven't been demonstrated. This is imagination. This is somebody drawing lines on paper. So it's religious belief. So the example of bactericide or pesticide, it's selecting a slice of a pre-existing code. Where is it creating anything new?
Well, it wasn't. The duplicated part was already there, but a point mutation would be something new on a duplicated section.
Okay, I taught biology 15 years. All mutations I've ever heard of or seen are harmful or fatal or useless, do nothing. Like our ducks that you saw today. They've got weird feathers on their head because they have a mutation. The bones of the skull didn't grow together right. So the feathers grow funny on their head. They already had feathers. It didn't add any new information. It just made the feathers grow funny in a spot.
Yes.
Where's the example of something adding information that is beneficial?
There's also something called de novo mutations, where mutations just kind of appear out of nowhere.
Right.
And I was reading a paper about stickleback fish.
Mhm.
There are two species they were looking at, and different populations of one species. The novel mutation were appearing more in the closely related, like the different populations of the same species. And these new mutations usually originate in the gonad tissue, and from there spread reproductive. Anyway, so there is new information coming in through de novo mutation.
There's a mutation in the gonads that are now part of the reproductive system going on to the next generation. And has it ever been observed to change it to, if you're talking about a stickleback fish, is it now changing it to anything other than a stickleback fish? Or you have to imagine that it might happen?
Well, eventually I can change it to a new species of stickleback fish. And from there, of course, you do need time from that to get a new species of something that isn't a stickleback fish, but it would still be a fish. It would still, for a while,
Yeah, I guess I don't understand how you guys cannot see that this is taking place in your imagination. This is not taking place in reality. We don't see it changing to anything other than a stickleback fish. Even if the mutation is in the gonads, where it's going to be, in the reproductive cells that go to the next generation, it still turns out to be a fish, a stickleback fish. So God said they would bring forth after their kind. I would like to see some scientific evidence of this not happening. Lots of animals are having babies. Farmers try hard to make them change to what they want. More beef for the cow, more milk from the cow, whatever, bigger, smaller. They now have a 20-inch tall cow, full grown, okay? It's still a cow. Like with dog breeders, they've been trying hard for thousands of years to develop special breeds for something, long hair, short hair, long leg, short leg, heat resistance, cold resistance, whatever. They're stuck in the dog kind. They're stuck. Nobody's ever produced a non-dog in all the selective breeding they've done. So if we with selective breeding can't do it over thousands of years, why would we think natural selection would do it even over billions of years? It's not observed to happen. That's all. And I say, I don't care if people believe all this stuff. I don't care, make your family tree all you want. I object to calling it science, and I object to being all the kids being forced to learn that at taxpayer expense. That ought to be taught in a private school. It's a religious belief, and you're welcome to it. But it's like SpongeBob behind me here. It's imagination.
All right, let me make a point about the fossil record, which is what I was wanting to talk about.
Okay.
Let's talk about conodonts. You know what conodonts are?
I don't remember.
They're these little eel-like creatures.
Right.
They've got these little weird, like array of teeth,
Mm-hmm.
and they apparently would shed these teeth quite a bit. They lived from the Cambrian to the Triassic.
If you believe in the geologic column, which I don't, but okay.
Okay, but still, that's where you find the teeth, between those geologic layers. Now, shark scales, dermal denticles, are about the same size and density as conodont teeth.
Okay.
You don't find dermal denticles anywhere in the Cambrian, but you do find them. You do find conodont teeth in the Cambrian.
Mm-hmm.
And with a hydrologic sorting model or even an ecologic zonation model, there's really no way to explain that, because sharks will shed millions of dermal denticles in their lifetimes, and there are probably billions of sharks at any given time.
Mm-hmm. And sharks' teeth are found everywhere.
Yeah, right. And the microfossils of the dermal denticles are even more common.
Mm-hmm.
So for there not to be any in Cambrian, which is usually associated with marine in a marine environment, how would you explain there not being any dermal denticle fossils in the Cambrian or pre-Cambrian?
Well, I would say there's no such thing as a Cambrian or pre-Cambrian, but I would also say the fact that certain types of fossils from certain types of, like sharks, are found in one layer might indicate that that's when they were buried at the same time during Noah's flood. They could, as I often said, they could be sorted by hydrologic sorting. They could be sorted by their habitat. The sharks are already in the water when the flood came. So if there were a great thermal change from fountains of the deep breaking open or something, they would all die at the same time in the same area. Plus, you said during the Cambrian, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Does the Cambrian era contain limestone?
It does.
Okay. Does the Cretaceous area contain limestone?
Yes.
Okay. How do you tell the difference between Cretaceous limestone and Cambrian limestone?
Cretaceous limestone will have coccolithophores in it, and Cambrian limestone won't, because they didn't exist at the time.
So you're telling that it's what zone it's from by the types of fossils.
In this instance.
Which is what many have pointed out. You guys date these layers by the fossils, and you date the fossils by the layers. This is pure circular reasoning. There's no, if it's limestone's found in all of these layers of your geologic column. It's limestone. It's much more logical to believe, like I mentioned, that during Noah's flood, which lasted a year, there's just the tide going up and down with no interruptions by banging into continents like it has now. The tide could become harmonic and go up and down about 200 feet is the current estimate. A harmonic tide on liquid covered Earth would go up and down 200 feet. Technically, the tide is just held under the moon while we spin. Get my Earth globe here. So the tide stays still under the moon while we spin around, okay? But to us, it looks like the tide's going up and down. It is actually in relation to the Earth. But the moon is holding that bump. The water then is rushing in and out of that bump every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. And it's the sideways movement of that water that's going to automatically sort things by all sorts of features. That's why, like this little sand toy here, you just tip it over, it'll make 20 layers in minutes in your hand. It's the sideways movement of the water that formed, I think, all of the layers that we see, or nearly all. Some of them may have formed in the last 4,500 years since then. But most of the layers and most of the erosion would have taken place in the first 100 or few years after that flood, because the layers would still be soft. They would dry from the top down. You'd get a crust, and after it dries, maybe for 50 years, the crust might be 100 feet thick of dry rock. Now, sedimentary rock, by the way, is obviously used to be mud. And then once the erosion cuts through that, it gets to the soft part. Now the erosion goes crazy. So I think you're claiming that the Cambrian or Cretaceous, whatever it was, you're finding these, you're saying none of these sharks' teeth are found in a certain layer. And that is supposed to be evidence for that A, in your mind, this is evidence they didn't live in that period. Mm-hmm. And B, that they are able to turn into something else in a different layer later. In a court of law, I think that'd be thrown out as laughable.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying they turn into something else. I'm really just saying they didn't exist at this time. That's really the point I'm making. And you said hydrologic sorting. If that's the case, they're the same. The shark scales are the same density as the conodont teeth. And they should be found together, and they're not, except for higher up in the strata. In the Cambrian, they're not.
Okay, but not being found together, I think, is very poor evidence for anything. Nobody's ever found human and chicken footprints in the same rock strata. So that proves humans and chickens did not live at the same time.
Well, I've seen human and chicken footprints in the same mud layer.
Well, on our barn right here, those are
Yeah.
today. But as far as they find footprints of all kinds of animals, fossilized footprints are common. Okay, all kinds of animals have been found. I think during Noah's flood, the crust of the earth might have been flexing up and down. Part of it might have been underwater for a few days, and then the crust of the earth, because it was all broken up and it's still broken up, the fault lines, the plates would be shifting up and down. So you may have an area that comes up out of the water and becomes dry ground for a few weeks. All the animals run over there. And so the footprints lead to this high ground. Hey, here's a safe place. And then it gets submerged and someplace else lifts up. Gradually, the whole world is flooded. But why don't we find human and chicken footprints in the rocks together? Fossilized footprints. If I said that's proof humans and chickens did not live together, everybody would realize how stupid that is. Chickens, we don't need to find the footprints together. They're living together today. We got a bunch in our barn. So the absence of shark scales in a certain layer, I think, does not prove anything. It might be an evidence you want to use for your theory, but it would certainly not be considered a proof. Okay, go ahead.
All right, you mentioned things running away from the flood. Something that can't run away from the flood would be plants.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna give another example from my personal experience. There's a ridge near where I live, probably about 1,000 feet long, this ridge, and I've dug, sledgehammered and pickaxe and probably found hundreds of these. These are called calamites, right here.
Right.
And I've also found cordites. Both of those plants are found in carboniferous rock typically. And that's where I found them. Now, why would I not? Again, they can't run. So why am I not finding oak leaves or acorns or bamboo? Why am I not finding fossilized any of those?
Okay. What did you say the name of the layer this came from was?
Carboniferous.
How do you know it's carboniferous?
U.S. Geological Survey.
And how do they know it's carboniferous? Because it contains these.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's usually radiometric dating, usually for the petroleum industry, natural gas, stuff like that.
Well, you realize there was no such thing as radiometric dating just 70 years ago. Okay?
Right.
It just was invented.
It was perfected in the
50s.
I want to say, yes.
Willard Libby, University of Chicago. Okay.
Yeah.
So way before that, back in 100 years before that is when they made the names of these layers, carboniferous, et cetera. Okay. So you can't blame radiometric dating for that.
Well, they didn't have it mapped out like we do now back then.
And my point would be this whole mapping system of all which layer is which is based on a circular reasoning that the fossil can date the layer and the layer can date the fossil. When each of these layers contains limestone, is there sandstone found in most of these layers also?
There is.
So there's Jurassic sandstone, Silurian sandstone, Permian sandstone. And the only way to tell the difference of which sandstone it is by the fossils they're finding in it. This is circular reasoning.
One of the reasons for that is because you really can't radiometrically date sandstone.
Right.
Igneous rocks.
So how do you
dating igneous layers?
That's what they say.
Yeah.
What if there are no igneous layers anywhere around there? They find.
Well, they have to do the best between the two they can find.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is sandstone. There is Cambrian sandstone, which you cannot carbon date. Mississippian, Silurian, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. There's sandstone here in all of them. And you can't tell the age, especially if there's nothing to radiometrically date, like an igneous rock or something, lava or tuft or volcanic ash or something. So this is all silly, in my humble opinion, to say we know the age of this fossil by the layer it came from, and we know the age of the layer by the fossil that came out of it. I think most people are saying that's not logical, even if a bunch of people decide to believe it.
See, I didn't know what this was when I found it. I knew where it came from, carboniferous, based on the map. And I went on Facebook so you have someone identify it. I forget the name of what they said it was. It's a type of brachiopod, but this brachiopod is found mostly in the carboniferous. It's also in the Permian and I think a little bit before. But It's
Are brachiopods found alive today?
there are some alive today as well, but not this species.
Well, if there's some alive today, couldn't they have been found in any layer between the first one they found and all the rest of them? Why are they absent in some layers?
They're pretty much in every layer from.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where they originate, but they're pretty much in every layer up until present.
Mm-hmm.
But not this species. This species here, which name I can't think of,
Mm-hmm.
is mostly found in the Carboniferous.
Okay. Well, I often show people petrified clams. We have hundreds of them here. Petrified clams in the closed position, I think, are pretty clear indication they were buried quickly and buried alive. Because at restaurants, if you go to order clams, which I would never do unless I would die of starvation, if it's open, they're not allowed to sell it because it's dead.
Mm-hmm.
They have to drop it into the boiling water to cook it while it's alive, boiled alive. So to find them closed and petrified indicates they were buried alive and they were buried quickly. And these are found by the trillions all over the world. And yet, to me, there's a simple explanation. Noah's flood, tide going up and down, rushing in and out, would have made waves of mud at the bottom, avalanches of mud, mudslides underwater, turbidity currents, and buried them alive. So these are found on top of Mount Everest, all over the world. They're found. So how do you guys explain this fossil right here?
Well, it's definitely a clam that died, and
Right.
probably alive.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean a global flood, but probably a mudslide, something like that. It got buried, or it was even alive, and it died in the mud. Because clams oftentimes will just bury,
Right.
and maybe it died there, and got fossilized that way. But I found I look for river mussels quite a bit. I found plenty of dead ones that are actually still pretty much closed, and their muscle is rotted away. Sometimes the hinge remains locked in place.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, but they are open a little bit. All of them I've ever seen open a little bit, die. They're locked in place, and then something crawls in there and eats it. Yeah.
Usually, yes.
Yeah, usually something eats it. Okay. Well, Donnie, I don't know if anything else I've got, but my position is there is no such thing as a geologic column. There's no such thing as carbon. Oh, go ahead.
I've got one more thing.
Go ahead. Yep.
Well, I got a bunch more things, but I can.
We'll take it away.
Yeah. Well, the Williston Basin, I brought this up before, but it's in North Dakota. It's got the Precambrian all the way to some of the more modern layers past the Cretaceous, which I'm not so good at those. But and they've even done core samples of the Williston Basin, again for the oil industry. They found fossils in those cores, and not only do the layers align the way they're said to, but the fossils come up in the order that you would expect them to. They find like Canella trilobites in the Ordovician. They find conodonts in the Bakken formation of the Devonian, and there's some plant fossils up higher. And so let's see. So ecological zonation, like you were talking about shark teeth, and sharks live pretty much in every environment in the ocean. They live in the reefs, the shallows. They live in the open ocean. They live in the depths.
Right.
So ecologic zonation doesn't really work because the Cambrian is also usually associated. Cambrian fossil formations are associated with marine environments. So there should be shark teeth or scales there as well, but there never are, at least not to this point.
If they found a shark's tooth in Cambrian, would they reclassify the Cambrian to save the theory? They'd call it something else?
I don't believe so.
I believe they would.
Amateurs search Cambrian formations all the time, and they post it on Facebook pages. And if they don't, oftentimes they don't know what they found, and they say, "What's this?" And I've looked through a lot of that to see if there's any kind of indiscrepancy, and somebody would find something eventually, and somebody might still. But so far, apparently, no one has.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Let's see. I was about to say something else. Let me think. I guess we can go to questions if you want.
Okay, I'm ready. Oh, questions,
Okay.
Donnie?
All right, Kent.
Oh, hang on.
Go
You
ahead,
got one
Ken.
more.
One more thing.
One more. Go ahead.
Okay.
Bonus topic.
I challenge everybody to go out fossil hunting, look at a geologic map, and know what layer they say it is, and not that if you necessarily have to believe that, but go out and see if you can find a fossil that doesn't fit in that layer. And if you can do that, maybe that would be significant enough to disprove evolution. And that's something anybody can do.
And you're aware that many people have claimed with pretty overwhelming evidence to have found human footprints with dinosaur footprints. This would be an example of something that should not exist. I've walked in them myself. I helped excavate some in Glen Rose, Texas. But there have been quite a few locations where they find human footprints and dinosaur footprints. They have a couple where the dinosaur stepped on top of the human print halfway and obliterated part of it, meaning the dinosaur was there last. Others are the human footprints on top, or like he's walking in the footprints, like somebody walking in deep mud would follow somebody else's footprints. I know you have to just simply dismiss it. It can't be true. But what if it turns out to be true? They found human and dinosaur footprints together. Here's an example of finding something in the same layer that should not be together. Do you then abandon your theory, or do you look for a way to get rid of the evidence?
I would abandon the theory, but
okay.
The way I see it, the ones in Glen Rose don't really look like humans. They look like a three-toed, maybe theropod or something of that nature.
Well, the dinosaur footprints are three-toed theropods when I was there, but the human footprints, I've got castings of them in our science.
They look like they slid on the mud and they formed from the pictures I've seen. And the ones that where they stepped on them, that's from Dr. Carl Baugh, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. I personally believe those are fakes.
Oh, Dr. Daughtery also.
And
quite a few.
Answers in Genesis does too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think their answers in Genesis would be wrong in that case. So if one was found, and if you dug it up yourself, you lift up a slab of rock, and here you have a clear human footprint, toe separation is just right, arch in the foot just right, length to width ratio just right, and a dinosaur footprint, then you're saying you would abandon your...
I think I probably would.
Okay.
I would definitely do some kind of rethinking. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been trying to do that with a few different. This is older Carboniferous, this fossil. This is younger Carboniferous, and this is Eocene right here. And all of these line up with where they should have been. And I didn't even know what this was when I found it. And it turns out it's called Venericardia planacosta, only found in the Eocene. And I had no idea. And I was searching the Eocene. I was looking for that Basilosaurus whale fossil.
Yeah.
And
that'd be great. If you find one, I want it for my museum here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Donny. Questions.
So my first question to you, Kemp, since a lot of the debate, most of the debate dealt with the fossil record as Jackson's #1 evidence for evolution or common descent, what would be, in your opinion or viewpoint, the best explanation from the creationist position for the so-called ordering in the fossil record? Fish, amphibian, reptiles, mammals, and then man.
Right. If you memorize the word farm, F-A-R-M, that's the way they say they went: fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. If the fossils were found in that order, does that prove one is evolving to the next? Obviously, no. We don't see any fish evolving into anything today, or amphibians evolving to reptiles, or reptiles to mammals. It would be, even if they're always found in that order, it would not be any help to the evolution theory, because you still haven't proven one changing to something else. Okay, so it's no help at all. I point out there's no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils by the trillions. None of them talk, and none of them have date stamped on them. So they're dating these fossils by a chart, this geologic column made up in the 1830s by somebody's preconceived idea that here's a Eocene and a Cretaceous and all this stuff. It doesn't exist anywhere. It's imagination. Now, it's thoroughly taught around the world. So is communism. So is Islamism. So is Catholicism. Lots of things are taught to maybe billions of people. It doesn't make it true. Everybody needs to be, a real scientist would keep his eyes open and say, okay, I'm going to be skeptical and think, now, are you sure? The people in Germany in World War II should have been more skeptical of Hitler when he came along with his new idea that we're the superior race. Let's go conquer the world. The Japanese should have been more skeptical when their emperor said, oh, the Japanese are the superior race. We got to conquer the world. They should have been more skeptical of that. And I think people should be skeptical of the teaching that one type of fossil can turn into something else, when no animal alive today is doing that. And their answer is always, it takes more time. Well, then it's not observable science. To say we see these changes, I agree we see changes. The changes are always limited, in modern terms, in modern farming, they now have 4,000 varieties of potatoes that have been developed. Some handle acid soil better, alkali soil better, some cold climate, some warm climate, some are bigger, some are smaller, sweet potato, etc. So far, they've never been able to get out of what anybody would call the potato class. It's still a potato. Same with dogs. We have Great Danes and Chihuahuas and a whole bunch of useless ones in between, like my wife's pug. They're still dog. The pug is barely a dog. And they can't get out of that. It's still a dog. So they want you to imagine that if you had billions of years, now it could do something else. Okay, that's imagination. There's no fossil record. Doesn't exist. My humble opinion. It's all imagination. Okay, go ahead. You want one, Donnie? You got one for him too?
Yes, Kent, thank you. Jackson, since that was a challenge question for Kent, I really appreciate the answer. Challenge question for you now, to be fair.
All
How
right.
would you respond to creationists who argue the fossil record generally is sudden appearance, stasis, and overlap? Now, by overlap, what creationists might mean is when you find purported transitional forms like Tiktaalik, the famous fishapod, you end up finding true tetrapods in rock layers lower than where Tiktaalik is found. For example, they discovered the tetrapod foot tracks in Poland that evolutionists dated to about 20 million years prior. And so how would you respond to that creationist challenge, Jackson? Go ahead.
Well, there are tetrapodomorph fish that predate the tracks in Poland. So maybe Tiktaalik isn't exactly the link they thought it was, but something before it, like Eustonopteron, Gogonasus, Panderichthys, there are still other ones that most people don't even know about.
Okay. And then sudden appearance and stasis.
Sudden appearance and stasis. Well, the way I see it, it's going to look like something's staying the same for quite a while if you find it in the ground. I mean, like in the Carboniferous, sure, everything like these calamites, they disappear at the end of the Permian. They disappear or sometime in the Permian because of the Permian-Triassic extinction event. And so it can look like they suddenly leave the fossil record without explanation. But if you look deeper, there is an explanation.
Okay, Jackson, I appreciate that. So there's two challenge questions, one for Kent, one for Jackson. Now we'll get to some of these audience questions. Very good, gentlemen. This one comes in from Van's 182 Workshop. $5 super chat question for Roe. Please explain the PowerPoint Kent has of the fish going through different layers. Did it bow on its nose for millions of years?
Balance, probably meant
Yeah,
balance.
probably bounce or
Just because it's standing on its nose doesn't mean it's in a different layer. Is basically the answer. And that's not a fish. That's an ichthyosaur.
Any thoughts, Kent?
Well, here's the drawing of what was found, and they claimed that the nose of it was in rock, supposedly 1 million years older than the rest of the head. I point out all sorts of polystrata fossils are found. Petrified trees do the same thing. Put them back up, brother, my slides. You have petrified trees standing up, running through all these layers. I think that's indication these layers all formed in one year-long flood in Noah's time. So polystrata fossils, whether it be a fish or anything else, is clear evidence that the layers cannot be millions of years different in age. Here's one we had in our museum in Pensacola, if I can get it here. A petrified stick running through. There's me standing by one in Yellowstone. But the petrified trees in the vertical position, sometimes they're upside down, running down through all these layers. Now you really got a problem. And the creationist explanation is very simple. Noah's flood with the tidal pumping up and down and in and out would make all these layers in 1 year. And the layers simply are not different ages like they're claiming. Where's that one I had? Right here. There you go. Okay. That's in Pensacola at our museum down there. I had down there in Pensacola, running through 12 layers of slate. So each of the layers, obviously those 12 at least, all formed in probably minutes, and tidal pumping up and down, making water go in and out. Google experiments in stratification, the experiment the guy did in Colorado with the hydrologic sorting of all sorts of things based upon sideways movement of the water. Noah's flood is the best explanation, for having fossils at all. No animals today are fossilizing. I mean, animals die by the millions. Colonel Sanders killed a bunch of them last year, and none of them fossilize. We don't see fossilization happening anywhere, to my knowledge. How many buffalo were killed, in the 1860s and 70s to subdue the Indians? Millions, and none of them fossilized. So the problem is not finding fossils. There are trillions of fossils. The problem is we don't see it today. We don't see any animal today changing into something else. And fossilization, where they go through different layers, I think it's easily explained. The layers aren't different ages. That's why. So go ahead.
Very good. Thanks, Kent. Jackson, it was for you, so you can have the last word if you'd like.
Well, I noticed all the polystrate trees, almost all of them, were lycopsid trees, and they weren't running through multiple layers. They were all firmly in the Carboniferous period. They've all been dated to the Carboniferous. Just because it looks like a lot, I mean, floods do happen, mudslides do occur, or whatever caused that. But the whole thing is in the Carboniferous. It's not going through the Permian Triassic. It's not going up from the Carboniferous into the Permian. It's all in the Carboniferous.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Here's one for both. Jackson, let's start with you, and that way Kent can have the last word for this one. James Dare, question for both debaters. Where on earth can anyone go and see the actual evolutionary geologic column in its entirety?
In its entirety, you'd have to drill down to see it, but North Dakota, there's the Yukon Basin also. There's the basin in Libya. There's one in Tunisia, China, Australia. I think Poland has one, and several more. But there are quite a few places where you could see it if you had a very long drill.
Thank you, Jackson. Kent, any thoughts on that?
Well, if you drilled down in one of these areas in North Dakota or Poland or wherever and would drilled a core sample, I believe they say it would have to be about 100 miles thick to get all of them in there. But if you could get a core sample of all these, and none of them contain any fossils, but each of them, you go through layers of limestone, shale, slate, etc. How are you going to know what to call it? How do you know it's Carboniferous if there's no fossils in it? How do you tell Carboniferous sandstone from any other kind of sandstone if you don't find any fossils?
Good answer. Thank you, Kent. Okay, I guess, Jackson, you kind of touched on this in the previous question, but if you want to elaborate, just to be fair to the questioner, Apologetics 101, appreciate the question. Question for Jackson. What is your response to petrified trees being found in different layers all over the world?
My responses are mostly the lycopsid trees in the Carboniferous period. So they're really not in multiple layers.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Kent, any thoughts?
I disagree. I think they're running through obviously different layers, some of them 30, 40 feet tall. Up in Birmingham, Alabama, friends of mine works in the coal mine up there. He's a manager, one of the coal mines. They find petrified trees running through a seam of coal, then rock, and then another seam of coal. In the evolution model, the forest has to grow, get buried, compacted into coal, and then new sediment on top. Then a whole new forest has to grow. And yet in Specimen Ridge, there are 27 consecutive layers of material with petrified trees running from one layer to the next, thousands of them. Joggins, Nova Scotia, same thing. So it all goes back to the idea that the layers were all formed in Noah's flood. If you had Noah's flood, the log mats from trees being ripped up by the billions, log mats would float around like they do in any major flood. You get log mats floating around, dropping off a debris trail. As they get soaked full of water, get to a certain saturation point, they sink to the bottom. Then you get mud washing on top. Then the wind might shift and blow the log mat the other way. You may get another layer. You may get a layer of logs that would then turn to coal under pressure, and then layer of mud, another layer of logs, another layer of mud. You might get all that in 3 weeks. Might get 5 or 6 layers just by the wind blowing a different direction, or the tide moving a different direction, or the Coriolis effect of the spin of the oceans. So there's so many easier ways to explain these multiple layers of coal containing petrified trees, connecting all of them. I'll tell you what, I'll give you his phone number and name here. He's the manager of the coal mine up there. Here he is, Dr. Donald McDonald, Troy State University. He said he finds these all the time. This is running out right through one seam of coal, a petrified tree standing up, through layers of rock, and then through more layers of coal. We got one in our museum here, a chunk of a petrified tree that still has the bark on it. So these are not just running through one layer that's all in the whatever layer you said it was. They're found like they have in Birmingham, they have the Blue Creek Formation of coal and the Mary Lee Formation. And he said, Brother Hovind, we find trees. He said, look at my samples here. Sample H on the far left runs through the Mary Lee, right through it, and it goes down into almost to the Blue Creek. But sample A comes out of the Blue Creek and goes through the same layers. Anybody with a 4-year-old IQ and above would say these Mary Lee and Blue Creek Formation had to form quickly before the tree could rot. So I think that if you're willing to look at the evidence, you're going to have to say all these layers formed rapidly. Here's one, Bible.ca tracks Don Patton, petrified tree, 30 feet tall, running through a seam of coal, through a bunch of rock, through another seam of coal on top. I got another phone number. Dan Nelson in Cookeville, Tennessee, has pictures from Sparta, Tennessee, 30 miles south of Cookeville. Mines were used for coal for local use only. Highway Department widened and destroyed several huge polystrata fossils. I got his phone number. You can call me for it if you want. So people call me all the time, that especially work in coal mines. They say this is common to find trees standing up, running through. Put that back up with the picture. Okay. Running through one seam of coal, through rock, through another seam of coal. It is not logical to say a whole new forest had to grow and then be pressed under into coal. It's not logical. The layers all form. I think Noah's flood, with the log mats floating around, drifting around like they do in any flood, is a much more logical explanation. And I think, I forget the name of the guy's law that said the simplest explanation is probably the logical, it's probably the right one. The more complicated you have to be with your answer, probably the less likely it is to be true. It wasn't Pascal. Who was that guy?
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor, yeah. Occam's razor, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Brain dead there for a minute. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Jackson, yeah, go ahead. You can have the last word.
All right. Well, about the coal, do you know why there's so much coal found with these lycopsid trees?
There must have been a lot of them on the earth when it got destroyed by the flood.
That's one explanation. But it's, in my opinion, because most of the coal seems to have formed during the Carboniferous, and that's where most of the coal is found, in the Carboniferous strata.
Is coal being formed today in any location we can go watch it form?
There are peat bogs today, and you could argue that it's forming there today, but it would take quite a while to form it that way.
And you're aware that there's more coal in the world buried right now than you could make if you took all the trees and plants in the world and buried them.
Sure.
You could not form all the coal. They have coal seams in Wyoming 300 feet thick, solid pure coal. And you believe all that, I got pictures of it here somewhere, but all of that is from slow, gradual accumulation, or could it be one big flood deposited? How do you get a 300-foot thick layer of coal? Probably have to start with 500 feet of wood, compress it into coal. They can make coal in the laboratory in 20 minutes. That's not a problem. But it costs you $10 to make $2 worth of coal. So it's not cost effective. But these giant layers of coal, which I've got pictures of somewhere here, 300 feet thick. Google it. What's the thickest coal layer? It's enormous amounts of coal in the world. And the creationist perspective is simple. Noah's flood. The world we see today is 70% underwater. That's not what Noah saw. God made the world to be inhabited. So if the world was mostly habitable, instead of today like it's mostly uninhabitable, 10% under ice caps, 10% under deserts, 71% underwater. So most of it today is uninhabitable. But if Earth was mostly habitable with huge trees, if the people lived to be 900, I think the trees were probably much bigger and much more plentiful in a perfect environment. It'd be dense forests everywhere. All that gets destroyed, and all the coal in the world formed in one big flood, Noah's flood. That's my take on it. Go ahead.
I think that was the last response for me for that question.
No, I can give another one if you want.
Okay. I really kind of lost track of my thoughts there, so we can just go to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, gentlemen. I appreciate how thorough you guys are on these important questions. So here's a question for you, Kent, from Andrew Cumming. And he's asking, how can more coal form than could ever exist today in a single year if a global flood happened?
Well, I kind of just answered that. The coal, if you took all the trees we have today, there's not enough trees to do it. But see, today the Earth is 70% underwater. No trees are growing there. It's 10% under ice caps. No trees are growing there. 10% in deserts. So if you look at today's world and say, well, we couldn't make all this coal, I would agree. But you got to look at the pre-flood world where you could easily make all this coal. Pre-flood world was much different, mostly habitable. I'm going to pick a number and say it's 90% land and 10% water. Instead of today, 29% land and 71% water, then it's not a problem. And if it was even temperature, I'm a strong believer in what's called the canopy theory, the crystalline canopy above the atmosphere, which is now gone. That crystalline canopy would pressurize the air, making everything grow faster and bigger before the flood came. God designed the world to be inhabited, Isaiah 45. So to look at today's world and say, wow, there's too much coal, therefore evolution is true, is very poor logic. What was buried in the flood? The pre-flood world was buried in that flood, which would have been very different.
Thank you, Kat. Jackson, any thoughts?
I think it's better explained by tens of millions of years of the Carboniferous period, accumulating things in peat bogs and fossilizing them and repeating the process over and over. So,
okay, Kat, did you want the last word?
No, I said my piece. I'm right. He's wrong.
All right, very good. Stephen Tibbetts, question for Roe. If evolution has to be changed to fit new facts, at what point can we consider it true? And how can the facts prove the theory written to match the facts?
I mean, we don't know 100% that everything about the theory of gravity. There's a law of gravity. There's also a theory of gravity, but we don't know if everything about gravity is 100% correct. I mean, we know things fall. We don't know really how they fall. We're still working that out. Physicists are. I'm not, obviously. But the fact that we don't know everything and that things change with new data does not mean it's wrong. It means we don't know everything about it yet, and we probably never will know everything about it. And it goes for a lot of things that everyone accepts.
Okay,
right.
Thank you. Yep, Kent, go ahead.
Yeah, Stephen, I think good question. I think he's correct. The theory has to change. If the facts are found to prove something is incorrect, you should change your theory. The theory of gravity is that things are attracted based upon the mass of the two objects, the mass of the ink pen and the mass of the earth, and there's an inverse square law and all that stuff. And so far, it's always worked. It's been demonstrated over and over again that if you drop an object, you can calculate how fast it'll go depending on air resistance and stuff and the surface tension. But the law of gravity has been tested over and over, and it's nothing compared to evolution. Every time we test evolution, we find dogs produce dogs and cows produce cows. But they claim dogs and cows and butterflies are related. Let's test that. Evolution is not scientifically testable. If you could say, wow, how did this amoeba, like these family trees they show, they want me to pay to have all the kids taught that we all started off as a protozoa in this case. I'm just saying that's not science. We don't ever see protozoa produce anything other than baby protozoa. Never. So it's not observable. The fact is, we don't see it happening. We can't even make it happen. Therefore, they should abandon the theory. But that's the only theory they've got that leaves God out, and they like that theory because they don't want God telling them what to do. That's my humble, totally unbiased opinion.
Thank you, Kat. Jackson, you can have the last word if you want.
All right. Well, I don't argue it leaves God out necessarily, and I'm not here to make that argument. I just want to clear that up. But that's all.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jackson. Kat, a debate question and answer is not complete until your biggest fan gets an opportunity to send you a question. So, creationist crybaby. I wish we could see your big crybaby.
It's right up here.
There.
Can I get that? Here. Just for you.
I do get a kick out of it, and I know so does the audience. So yeah, there we go.
Crybaby.
Dedicated to
Okay. Anyway, go ahead, crybaby. Let's hear it.
Okay, here we go. From the crybaby. Kent, if you had 3 stacked volcanic layers, each from eruptions 1,000 years apart, are the layers the same age? why would you say the top layer was from outer space?
Well, if you had 3 layers of volcanic ash or tuft or magma, and they're 1,000 years apart, I'd like to know how you know they're 1,000 years apart. Did you live that long to see them? But let's assume that's true. A volcano is not creating new material. It is recycling material that's already existing. It's melting it down, shooting it out to the surface, and letting it harden again. I've used the illustration. If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card now younger? Well, no. It's got moved from one place to another. So moving material from one location to a new location does not change the age of it. And yet they want to think that because this layer of volcanic ash or lava or whatever is now in a new location, it's recycled. I've often said every molecule on Earth is the same age, whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion. It's all the same age. Moving it to a new location doesn't change the age of it. So if they're from 3 stacked volcanic layers from eruptions 1,000 years apart, I don't know that you could. Carbon dating, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, all those have serious drawbacks. And most people that understand it admit we're making some assumptions here. Okay, has it not been contaminated? Has the decay rate remained the same, which has been proven to not be true? Do we know what the initial content was, which is also proven you can't know that. So we can talk about that for an hour if you'd like, crybaby. But video number 7 of my series, you can get that on Dr. Dino, covers that, I think, in pretty good detail. So I would say if they're 1,000 years apart, they would all, I don't know if they would date the same age or not, because there's too many factors involved there and how they're dating them. The dating method's the problem. But yes, every speck of dirt is the same age.
Thank you, Kent. Jackson, any thoughts?
Yeah, all the material on Earth, or at least most of it, has been here since the beginning. But they're measuring the radioactive decay of the different elements. Like there used to be more uranium in the ground than there was lead, and now there's more lead than there is uranium. And you can also you can know the original content of a sample by working backwards to see how much radiogenic lead, for example, is in the sample, and then calculating back to how much uranium that would have been.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Kent, did you want a final word, brother?
Well, that, of course, is based on quite a few assumptions. You know, do you know that it all started off as uranium and turned to lead? What if it was created half uranium, half lead, and you're going to automatically date it by today's decay method and say, wow, that's millions of years old when it was created yesterday? I think there's samples that have been done in laboratories and things testing where they test living animals and find them to be dead for 10,000 years. And they take a sample off of a penguin or something and carbon date it. The penguin's still alive, but it dates, 8,000 years old. So I think it's been proven in laboratories that there are serious flaws with the dating methods. Too many assumptions. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Kent. Taylor K. She's got a question. She's coming at you. There's the crybaby.
Okay.
The pacifier has been pulled out. And so, Jackson, question for you from Taylor K. Appreciate it, Taylor. Why were animals, plants, and insects so much bigger in the ancient world? And what caused them to be so much smaller today?
Well, not all of them used to be bigger, but like during the Carboniferous, they think the insects and some of the arthropods were so large because of the oxygen content in the air, which it's not possible for a dragonfly to get this big across today for a lot of reasons, most of which is because there's not enough oxygen in the air for their breathing system to get that big anymore. And I mean, things in the, like I'll go back to the Cambrian because it's my favorite period. Things in the Cambrian tended to be small. The biggest thing was probably that big. And, today we have elephants and whales. And I mean, so not everything used to be bigger.
Thank you, Jackson. Kent, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, insects are an interesting topic for, I think, creation evolution debate. If you took a cube that's 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, it is 1 cubic inch, but it has 6 square inches of surface area, the sides. If it's breathing through the skin, the sides of it, the ratio is 6:1. You have 6 square inches to get oxygen into a 1 cubic inch body. Insects all breathe through their skin, through spiracles. If you enlarge your cube, to 2 by 2 by 2. It is now 8 cubic inches of volume, and each side has 4 square inches, and you got 6 sides, so you now have 24 square inches of skin. So you went from 6 to 1 to 3 to 1. By getting larger in size, you reduce the surface area to volume ratio. It becomes a problem. If an animal is breathing through its skin, it's limited how big it can get based upon how much oxygen is in the air, the percentage of oxygen, and the air pressure. Now, it's just simply a fact of science. They find fossil insects that are huge, 2-foot grasshoppers. Can't live today, but they did live. Here's their fossil. They lived. So the only explanation that's logical is they had more oxygen, which we know from amber samples, the Earth was 32 to 35% oxygen at one time. Air bubbles found trapped in amber. And they had greater air pressure. Under the biblical theory with the canopy overhead, this answers the problem for both of them. Adam and Eve and everybody probably lived in a world that had 30% oxygen or 32% and greater air pressure, which means you could run for hundreds of miles and everything would grow bigger. Dinosaurs have another similar problem. Their nostrils are too small. Got an 80-foot apatosaurus with nostrils the same size as a horse. How's he going to breathe? Well, today he couldn't. You couldn't get an 80-foot apatosaurus to live in today's world. So because the oxygen concentration is less and the air pressure is less. But we do find the fossils of these animals, and they do have the small nostrils. So why? It's simple. The Bible's right. It was a different world when God made it. So good question. Taylor, come down, visit Dinosaur Adventureland. So yes, I think many things were bigger in the past. Today, I think the biggest tortoise I'm aware of is 5 foot. They find fossil tortoises 15 feet. How do you explain that? To the Bible-believing Christian, it's not a problem at all. I don't have to make up a story. It's just the Bible says that God made a perfect world. I think the flood destroyed that. It's been ruined. I think the fossils of giant humans indicate something was different back then. Thank you, Taylor. Go ahead. Anything else, brother?
Yeah. Like the big sauropods living in the Cretaceous. The Cretaceous didn't have as much oxygen as, say, the Carboniferous, where the giant arthropods lived. But the reason they were able to maintain that size is because they had dinosaurs, a lot of them, had a very efficient breathing system, much like a bird. They had like a flow-through breathing system. Sauropods, theropods. And the evidence for that is the air sacs and the vertebra in the rib cage, I believe. But that's why they were able to maintain that size and even a lower oxygen environment than the arthropods of the Carboniferous.
What about the 2-foot grasshoppers? How did they live?
Because there was more oxygen in the Carboniferous.
Okay. Well, more oxygen when they lived, whether it's Carboniferous or not. Okay, yeah.
We kind of agree on that.
All right. And Taylor says she enjoyed the tour. Kat and Jackson, you enjoyed the real tour too, didn't you?
We did, yeah.
Very good.
Donnie,
Okay.
I got to tell you a story.
Sure.
My wife's children and grandchildren came here, and she has twins that are like 5 years old, and they wanted to take the real tour. So we took the real tour through the mud puddles and everything, and one of them just loved it. The other twin was kind of scared and getting splashed water on him and stuff, and yeah, I don't like the real tour. So then later his parents were going to go visit the realtor to talk about buying a house. And they said, kids, we're going to go see the realtor. You know, real estate.
Right.
And the 1 5-year-old, he just panicked. I don't want to go see the realtor.
That is good.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. So this one comes in from Stacy Turbville, $10 super chat. Appreciate it. I think this might be for you, Kat. He says, if Cain's descendants died in the flood, where did the Canaanites come from?
Well, the fact that there are similarities in the name means nothing. Okay. The Canaanites are not descendants of Cain. We don't know who all Noah's sons were married to. Okay. There's no evidence at all. Nothing to go on. Noah's kids might have married some of the other people there's Shem, Ham, and Japheth on the ark. They each were married, plus Noah and his wife. So I think some of the pre-flood genetic code from other varieties might have been passed right on through with you, Noah's sons and their wives. I don't think there's any way to tell that, though.
Okay, very good. I appreciate it. Jackson, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I don't really have anything to add to that one.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So this comes in from Proverbs Guys Ministries. Appreciate the question. I'm assuming it is for you, Jackson. With the moon's gravitational pull, how could we possibly be billions of years old? The moon constantly moves away from us. How close was the moon, and how did life even survive?
As the moon moves further away, it seems to be accelerating as it does that, because the gravity becomes less as it gets further and further away. Is the simplest answer I can give.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Kenton, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
On my channel, Genesis Baptist Church, we covered this probably a month and a half ago. I'm going to guess early January. We're going every Friday night. We're doing a session on the age of the earth, how to show the earth cannot be billions of years old. And I mentioned that one about the moon goes around the earth, and the moon is getting further away, about 1.5 inches a year. It's been well studied, and many secular sources have said there's a lunar recession problem. If you bring the moon in closer, there's a law called the inverse square law. If you brought the moon into 1/3 the distance, you take that fraction 1/3, inverse it, flip it over, and square it. It's 9 times the gravitational pull. And I point out that the inverse square law works with sound. You know, if you're twice as far from an object making sound, it's only 1/4 of the volume. It works with gravity, it works with magnetism, works with girls. You know, the closer you get, the more the attraction is. And so I think the inverse square law, even secular scientists would quickly say it puts a time limit on the Earth-Moon system. It's true the rate of recession changes. That's correct. It's a logarithmic recession. But they all say about 1.2 to 1.4 billion years ago, the moon and Earth orbit, the orbit would collapse. They would snap together like two magnets. So they're all giving a number of 1.2 to 1.4 billion. And yet the textbook says the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And many times tonight, Jackson has referred to, if you had time, then we could see that this could happen. But if you take away time with a simple scientific fact like the moon receding, now they're stuck with they need to get a new theory that doesn't involve 4.6 billion years. Because the moon is receding. Google lunar recession. The moon's leaving, and it puts a limit of about 1.4 billion years max.
Thank you, Kent. Jackson, any thoughts on Kent's response?
Nothing really to add to what I just said originally about it.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. What if, Kent, someone were to say in the chat, Andrew Cumming, a critic, he says, what if the rate of recession was not linear? And if I remember correctly, Dr. Hugh Ross, in your famous debate with him, used the same argument that the rate of recession was not linear. What are your thoughts?
Oh, we know it's not linear. It's a logarithmic, okay? And it's expected to be. I can call up my slides if we have time for seminar part 1, where I go through all that. I went through it a couple of weeks ago on my program, and you can see from the secular sources, they know it's not linear. It's a logarithmic progression. That's predictable. Let's see. The lunar recession problem. Let me get this to open up here. I have about 50,000 slides in my presentation, brother. Take me just a second. So the secular sources would say the fact that whether it's linear or logarithmic, it does not matter. It's moving away, which means it used to be closer. Changing it from linear to logarithmic only makes a different time scale, but still they all are saying 1.2 to 1.4 billion years. I've got it here somewhere. The sun is burning up, the moon is moving away, the earth is slowing down in its spin. I cover this I'm redoing my seminar part 1, the age of the earth. There it is, the lunar recession problem. This is slide number 326. Okay, 1 second. Put my slides up there if you would, brother. 3, 2, 6, enter. Why is the moon getting further away from the earth? BBC News. Okay. It is thought the moon was formed 4.5 billion years ago. Computer simulations of the impact with Earth-Moon system we see today. They know the moon's getting further away. Okay. What would happen if the moon were twice as close to the earth? From livescience.com. Well, if your moon were half the distance, it'd be 4 times the pull, which makes much greater tidal changes, which is going to erode the beaches. There wouldn't be any continents, they'd erode them down flat. BBC News, moon is believed to have formed after a massive collision between Earth and asteroid, which is absolute stupidity to believe such a thing. A collision is not going to form a nearly perfectly round moon like that, okay? Here's let's see, what magazine is this? Maybe this is the same one, BBC News, that further down the article. I should have put I tried to put the reference in there. You can Google it from that name, and I'm sure. At what rate is the moon moving away from the Earth? Moon is moving away from the Earth about 1.5 inches a year. This is from, yeah, don't know the reference there either. I try hard to reference everything, but the low Earth Moon age. There's NASA. I feel like we're drifting apart. They got a whole article back from 4 years ago about the moon is leaving us. Here you go, Forbes magazine. Right now, the moon is moving away at the rate of about 4 centimeters a year, 1.5 inches a year. Okay, 1.49 inches for you technical folks. Okay, moon is moving away from Astronomy magazine. So watch my program I did. I'm going to guess early January on this very topic. Physics.org. Why is the moon leaving? Well, we know why. The lunar drag is creating the tides, and the tides is the energy is transferred to the moon, making the moon move further away. Moon is moving away. Let's see. Here's the time limit. Why is moon getting further from the Earth? BBC. There's space.com. NASA. NRAO. Let's see. Moon's orbit is getting larger, 3.8 centimeters a year. Moon has been slowly drifting away. This guy says 2.5 billion years. Okay, I think most people that I've seen have settled in on moon is leaving about 1.5 inches a year. And if the inverse square law creates a problem, which applies to all sorts of things, gravity, light, magnetism, and girls, okay, Coulomb's law, inverse square, there's my wife at 10 feet away, and they're at 1 foot away, and they're, inverse square law. Okay, so the Earth-Moon distance 1,000 years ago would be 125 feet closer, million years ago, 28 miles closer, 10 million years ago, 284 miles closer, 100 million years ago, 2,800 miles closer, a billion years ago, 28,000 miles closer. 1.4 billion years ago, the orbit would collapse. Why is moon getting further away? I got all the articles here. The moon's getting further. It used to be closer. They would snap together. Here we go. Astronomical Journal, back 20 years ago. The evolution of the lunar semi-major axis presents a well-known timescale problem. The lunar orbit collapses a little over 1 billion years ago. If we take the moon's current rate of recession and project it back in time, it ends up with a collision 1.5 billion years ago. However, the moon was formed 4.5 billion years ago, meaning the rate of recession is a poor guide. In other words, we know it had to be different because we know it's 4.5 billion years old. We're not giving up on that one. Okay, they're not going to give up on that theory. So I think the lunar orbit, you can study for yourself. 1.4 billion years ago, they would snap together. It cannot be 4.6 billion years old. Now, if you need 4.6 billion for your theory, get a new theory. You can't have 4.6 billion years. Okay.
Thank you, Kent, for the detailed answer.
Sorry for a long answer. Go ahead. Take all the time you want.
That's okay. Jackson, go ahead.
All right, I'll just say the recession of the moon hasn't been linear. Again, like I said the first time, it's changed over time. So that's really the explanation I have. I mean, it's that simple.
But Donnie, we're talking about physical objects with laws of gravity that are not being affected by genetics. The moon's not making any babies. These are physical objects that have known laws of gravity that have never been proven wrong. To say it must have been different in the past is only an attempt to rescue the theory of evolution. It's not science to say such a thing. That's why the curve I've got here would be a logarithmic regression as opposed to linear. It's not a straight line. I've always said that. I've never said it's a straight line, regression. Today it's 1.4 inches, 1 inch and a half a year. It may have been greater in the past. Recession rate. Okay. Anyway, new question.
Okay, very good. Next question comes in from Tanya Brown. We have a lot of engagement in the chat, so good job, Kent and Jackson. Lots of people excited about this in-person debate. So Tanya Brown, question for Jackson Roe. How do you differentiate between convergent evolution, chimeric species, and evolutionary relationship? I'm assuming by chimeric species, she might be referring to
like a platypus or something.
Platypus, Tiktaalik, so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, chimeric species like a platypus, I mean, they might look superficially similar to a duck with the bill on the outside, but if you look at the skeletal structure, it's not a duck bill at all. It might look like it's a beaver tail, but it's not. They might lay eggs, but they're not really anything like reptile eggs. They're pretty unique. So the fact that they look kind of similar, when you dig deeper, they're not really all that similar. They're their own. Like scientists know what they are. They're monotremes. They're relatives of echidnas. There's one species of living platypus, and there are, I believe, 3 species of echidnas today.
Oh.
And those are all the monotreme group. And convergent evolution, and I mean, it can be difficult to tell about that sometimes with evolutionary relationships, but I mean, mainly the thing I wanted to touch on there is the chimeric species.
Thank you, Jackson. Kent, anything you'd like to add to that one?
Well, yeah, I think chimeric species like the platypus and these unusual creatures, I think God did that on purpose just to make the evolution theory look stupid. How did this evolve, guys? Put that together. Like there's so many animals that are just, they have nothing else similar on the planet. What is similar to a platypus? We might find they lay eggs and they have webbed feet. They have a bill like a duck. They're warm-blooded and have hair. I think it's not a collage of everything else. It was designed purposely to be able to laugh at the evolution theory. That's my hope and thought. Okay.
Thank you, Kent. Anything in terms of final word, Jackson?
Yeah. What's similar to a platypus? I would say an echidna because they're monotremes.
The echidna is more like a bird.
It's more like a porcupine.
Okay, the echidna, yeah, porcupine.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing similar to a platypus then.
Well, if you look at the physiology and some of the more, yeah, it's actually pretty similar.
Okay, so God made 2 animals to laugh at the evolution theory.
Okay, guys, I appreciate it. Very good. So I will say we have unlimited questions. We could do this till same time tomorrow. So let's get 1 or 2 more, then we'll wrap it up because Kent and Jackson, I do want to respect your time. So here's another one. Andrew Moore, question for Jackson. Research shows the chicken came before the egg. Wouldn't this prove the chicken had to be created?
I guess by that logic, yes. But I think what they mean is something came before the chicken. Like there are a lot of transitional fossils. I know you guys aren't big on those, but in the dinosaur bird line, my favorite one is Kai Hong. Can we put one of those up on the screen? It's the Donny. Would you put up the dinosaur skull real quick?
I think I might have got rid of those photos after your discussion. If you want to keep talking, I can try and find it. Just a sec. I'll have to take this.
It's an email. I know.
If you want to keep talking, I'll go look at my email and see if I have it.
Well, my point is the skull, if you look at it, it's clearly a theropod dinosaur skull. But the second image I was going to show is a tail with pennaceous feathers. I was going to try to do a little trick here and say they were different fossils and say, what do you think these are? But I guess I'll just narrate it now. So you don't even have to find it.
I did find the pictures if you want me to put it up.
Well, I ruined the surprise. But anyway, this dinosaur has pennaceous feathers on its tail, if you want to show that. Those are the pennaceous feathers. And
okay, so
that's the skull, if you want to show that again. If you saw the skull and nothing else, you would say that looks a lot like a theropod dinosaur, wouldn't you say?
I don't know. Might have been a toothed. A lot of birds have or had teeth in the past. We know there were teethed birds. There might be some today with still teeth. So maybe the whole thing was a bird to begin with, and not necessarily a dinosaur turning into something else. But
could have been.
We don't ever see animals today changing to something else. It can only happen in your imagination. It's not science.
All right, I guess we can go to the next question then.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Not sure we should go down this rabbit trail, but maybe for fun, we'll get a couple quick answers from you. I have a feeling you're both going to agree on this topic, so we'll get some agreements. Stacy Turbeville, appreciate the super chat, the support. He says, are there any good arguments for the flat earth?
No, there are
no. Okay.
Well, Kansas is flat, part of Nebraska is flat, and the rest of it's round. Okay. No, there's no good arguments for it.
Very good. There's some yeah, there you go. There's some agreements there. So this one comes in from Sea Science Film Labs for Kent. How do you explain the hundreds of feet high chalk cliffs of Dover?
Those are amazing. Chalk, Cretia, that's where they come up with the crazy name Cretaceous Age, which doesn't exist. I think during Noah's flood, the fountains of the deep broke open, like the Bible says, and hot water from inside the earth hit the water above it and killed everything within an effective range of the crack, maybe 50 miles, depending on temperature change, thermal gradient, whatever they can stand. And the creatures that are in the water would die and snow to the bottom. And just the moving currents of the earth, with the earth spinning around and Noah's flood, the moon pulling the tide up and down, you would get turbidity currents, and you would get, like we have today, currents in the ocean. They're ocean currents. Northern hemisphere, they turn one way, southern hemisphere the other way. So I think the chalk would tend to collect in big pools, hundreds of feet thick, and then fossilize, turn to stone. I've been to the diatomaceous earth quarry in Lompoc, California. Similar answer I would give to that. These giant formations of chalk or diatoms would be formed much better explained by a worldwide flood in the days of Noah, with the fountains of the deep creating the thermal gradient change, which may kill everything within 50 miles, and it would snow to the bottom, and tend to be sorted based upon body density in that case, or other factors of when it died. The bigger animals might survive longer before they're killed, than the chalk. So I think we'll have to wait and watch the video when we get to heaven, see exactly how it happened. Right now, it'd just be theoretical.
I appreciate it, Kat. Jackson, anything you'd like to add to that one?
Well, if that were to happen today, with a heating event to kill all the limestone forming organisms today, there's not enough in the world to form all the biogenic limestone there is in the earth. So, and if there was this heating event that killed the coccolithophores, the diatoms, it would also kill things like krill. It might not even kill whales directly, but it would kill the krill, which means the whales would have nothing to eat during this flood, and they would all starve to death. So why do we still have whales? It's kind of an unrelated question, but
okay, Kent, unless you wanted a final word, we got one last question and we'll wrap it up.
No, and we got a question from our audience here too, brother, if you can hang on for that one. You want that one first?
Yes, let's do that one first from your audience.
I stand by my previous answer. I think we'll see when we get the video in heaven that the flood did all of that. Go ahead, brother.
I have a two-part question. Jackson, it's been really nice getting to know you.
Yeah.
Very kind man. This conversation has been great.
Thank you.
Jackson, Mr. Roe, do you think it's in the realm of possibility that, and just a realm of possibility that there is a God and he did come to earth and loves you so much that he would do that and is calling you to have a faith in him? Let
me repeat this. I doubt you can hear that. Can you, Donnie?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. Is it possible that God came to earth and he loves you so much that he what? That
he came to earth and is trying to draw you to.
You're trying to draw you to him, talking to Jackson. Okay.
It's not impossible, and I'm open to any possibility like that. I'm not going to say. Yeah, I'm not going to say there's definitely not a God, and he's definitely not influencing me somehow. That's yeah.
And the second part was for Mr. Hogan. Mr. Hogan, do you think it's possible, in the realm of possibility, that evolution loves you so much that it's trying to draw you to itself to save?
I'll repeat the question. Is it possible that evolution loves me so much that it's to draw me to what?
To save you.
To save me.
Loves you so much it's trying to save you.
No.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, I appreciate that. Here we go from Scriptures and Stones. Looks like it's for you, Jackson. Do you think thick sediment deposits with many fossils found in failed Rift Valley arms could pose a problem for Kent's tidal deposition model?
I think I know a lot about fossils, but I honestly have no idea what that question's talking about. So I'll just hand it over to Kent. Do you have any idea?
Well, I think that the fact that we see these layers stacked like pancakes neatly on top of each other with very little, if any, erosion marks between them, and no soil built up between them. Why on top of the, this layer, isn't there some soil? And then the next layer, it's always, rock, 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 rock. Different, they give it a different name or something, but I think it goes back to the geologic column. It doesn't exist. All the layers would have formed quickly in 1 year long flood. And if you can picture a 1 year long flood that would have the crust of the earth flexing up and down, the water running back and forth, it's the tide pulling it back and forth. The underwater turbidity currents would cause great erosional marks, underwater canyons. And so I think what they're talking about is the failed Rift Valley arms, like the Rift, I think you're talking about the Rift Valley in Africa. I'd have to go back and research that one. I guess I need a more specific question on that. But is it that the arms, they don't take off into dendrite pattern, or is that what they're asking?
I'm not sure.
Geology question.
I'd probably have to get him to clarify.
Yeah, I think the flood and the post-flood, for the next few hundred years after the flood, the Bible says in Psalm 104, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down. If I filled this church 3 feet deep in water and lifted up one end of the building, the water would run down to this end. That end would now be exposed above sea level. And now it might be 6 feet deep down here. So the water from Noah's flood is still here. It got rearranged in the flood. At the end of the flood, when sections of the earth lifted up, other places went down. And I think that's the best explanation for why nearly all the mountain ranges in the world follow the coastline. The Appalachian Mountains follow the North Atlantic. The Rocky Mountains follow the Pacific. The Andes Mountains follow the South Pacific. Even the Alps follow the Mediterranean. I think there was a depression there where the Mediterranean would have sunk in a few miles and at the end of the flood, and the water would go to fill in the hole. And we have the Alps going across this way. So I think the flood is the best explanation for the geology that we see today. The mountains forming and the water, how fast it tilts would determine how fast the water runs off. I think central North America lifted up slowly, and the Mississippi River only dropped 7 inches per mile. It's a very low gradient stream, which is why it loops back and forth. Whereas places like Grand Canyon must have lifted up faster, the water ran off faster, and you get steep side, deeper canyons. It's all a matter of simple geology based upon what happened after the flood. And it's all explained easily by the world being covered with water. All that water coming from a dot smaller than a period, I have a hard time believing that one.
Okay, well, very good. I had a lot of fun with not only the discussion, but a comprehensive audience Q&A. We've had a lot of questions come in, a lot of positive feedback, Jackson and Kent. So I'm really glad that you were both able to get together in person and have this dialogue on creation evolution. Kent, Jackson, did you guys want any final words, final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just it's an interesting debate. I always love doing these. Never done one in person like this, so that was fun. And it's been cool getting to know everybody here. It's a cool place. Everybody's really nice, and it's well put together. It's a really nice park, actually.
So is it a cult?
I don't believe it's a cult.
Okay.
But, I mean, yeah.
You disagree with our theology and our science, but yeah. Okay.
I disagree with the science part of it, but I don't think it's a cult.
All right. Well, thank you for coming, Jackson. We can do it again. You're here for a few more days.
Yeah.
If you want to do another one, Donnie, work it out with Joseph, and we'll have another one, and pick a specific topic and let me know ahead of time. I can get my slides ready for that. So I would say God made the world. He owns it, and he makes the rules. And if you've broken his rules, you're going to face his judgment. And if you want to get out of that mess, you better accept his offer of salvation. And I did that 55 years and 5 days ago now. Accepted his offer to become his child. I'd like you all to see that. Call me if I can help you do that, 855-BIG-DINO. My website is drdino.com. Do you have something to advertise for your stuff? Or?
I mean, you can follow me on YouTube. I've got a couple channels. Jackson Roe, just my name, or Jackson's Expedition. That's my newest channel. It's not really about creation or evolution, but you can follow that also.
All right. Well, thank you, Donnie, for having us.
Okay, my pleasure. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate the time, Jackson and Kent.
Right.
So we're going to wrap things up. There we go. Great way to end an excellent exchange. God bless. Thanks for tuning in to the audience. I appreciate everybody's involvement in this second in-person debate of 2024. And so with that, Standing for Truth is out all. God bless.